Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today I am talking about Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I read this in June and I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about it, and I feel like I just need to talk about this book. So this video is going to have spoilers in it because it's not really a review of the book, it's more just like a brain dump of all of the things that I have been thinking about this book. There's a lot about this that I really liked. There are also some things that I really hated. So I'm not going to be giving much of a summary for this because I'm assuming that if you're watching this, you've probably read the book because I said this is going to have spoilers in it. Also, there are bajillions upon bajillions of summaries of this book out there. Although, to be fair, I don't feel like they do the book justice. People don't give you a lot of information about it, and I feel like I went into this book kind of expecting it to be something different than what it was. When people describe this book, they describe it as being very beautiful and whimsical, and I think that that is true, but there's a lot about this book that is heavier than I was expecting it to be. For some reason, when people say it's whimsical, in my mind, I guess I was expecting it to be a bit more of a fluffy story, but there are also some really interesting themes and some things that are much more intense about this book than I was really expecting. And those are some of the things that I liked the most about it. But I definitely went into this expecting something different than what I got, because I was expecting something that was much fluffier and whimsical. Even though I got whimsical, it was not as fluffy as I thought. So first of all, I want to talk about the things that I liked about this book, because I liked more things than I disliked. There was a lot that I liked about this. I hated the ending a lot, and I'm going to talk about that later. But there is a lot that I loved about this. I loved the writing of it. I think that it is writing that I really get along with. A lot of people describe it as very whimsical, and I think that I tend to like writing like that. But I thought that this world was really interesting. It seemed like it had a very rich history to it, and I wanted to know more about this world. I thought the magic was really interesting, and it felt like a very full world that we could have learned more about, and I really wanted to know more about it. And I really loved the way that the world was presented through her storytelling, because I think that Laini Taylor did a really good job of building this world in a very organic way. I think we found out information about it very organically. There were not parts that there wasn't anything that I felt like was an info dump. There weren't any monologues where people would just explain let me tell you about how this world works, which nobody talks like that. And so in this world, nothing like that happened. It all just came up very organically. We would kind of learn bits and pieces of information as we were going through the story, as the characters were going through their stories. And so we kind of had to piece together bits of information as we went. Even things apparently the people in this world have different anatomy. They have two hearts, they have veins that are not for blood but are for spirit or something. None of that was explained, but it was just sort of very seamlessly woven into the story. Characters would just these are just facts about their lives, and so it would come up, and they wouldn't go now let me monologue about why this is how our anatomy works. And sometimes I found it frustrating because I did think that it was a really interesting world and I wanted more information about it. I kind of wanted somebody to monologue about it, but I also really liked how organically it came up. I also loved the two main characters of Laszlo and Sarai. Laszlo is such an unassuming character. I loved how he's so supportive and giving to other people. He doesn't really think about what he wants. Sometimes I was like, Laszlo, you need to think about yourself sometimes. You need to move your own life forward and get your own stuff, have some self-interest. But I also kind of loved that about his character, that that's part of who he was, is that he was so willing to support others, happy for other people to succeed. I thought it was really interesting how he thought about each person has their story and the story that they're meant to live. And so for the guy, is it Theon or Theon? I wasn't sure how to pronounce his name. There was a moment where Theon is wondering, like, why is Laszlo helping him? And in Laszlo's mind, he's saying, oh, well, this is his story, not mine, so I'm just playing a supportive role. But then later on, when he gets the chance to go to weep, he's like, no, this is my story. I'm not playing a supportive role here. Like, I need to go. I'm not gonna let other people, like, take my spot. This is my story. So I thought that was a really interesting way to look at life, and it really allowed him to be such a supportive person to other people, because he could see, like, this is their story and so I support them. But then he also did sometimes have a little, like, enough self-interest to go, like, this is my story. I also loved Sarai. I think there were two particular things that I liked about her. One is that she stood up to Minya, because all of the other Godspawn would not stand up to Minya, and, like, oh my god, they were so annoying. And I hated Minya so much. But Sarai was the only one that would stand up to her, and I loved her. Like, I loved that about her. And that she would not let herself be controlled or manipulated by Minya. And, like, just good job, Sarai. Like, I loved that about her. The other thing that I liked about her was that she also had, like, perspective in life. Like, 3 of the Godspawn were just kind of useless. And then Minya was terrible. And I think that Sarai had a really interesting perspective because she was able to go into people's dreams and see their own experiences and their own fears and all of that. But it was still part of, like, her personality that she was able to experience that and use that to, like, give herself perspective and to have empathy for the humans who lived below them instead of just hating them. Because I think that she very easily could have had her powers of seeing into dreams, and she could have seen all of that suffering and fear in the humans, and she didn't have to react with empathy. She could have reacted, you know, with anger or fear of her own or some other way. So I thought that was really interesting about her character. I loved that she was able to see, like, that the gods were terrible and that the gods needed to die, and that the humans have suffered, the Godspawn have suffered, and she kind of was like, we've all suffered. We can move on now. Instead of having to, like, keep perpetuating vengeance back and forth, which seems to be what everybody else wanted to do. So I loved that about her. I also thought that it had some really interesting themes, especially ones about, like, memory. Is it better to forget, or is it better to remember all of your life? Would it be better to, like, forget all of the trauma that you've been through, but then you still kind of, like, know that something terrible happened, but you can't actually remember it and there are, like, pieces of your life missing? Or is it better to, like, live with the memories and that burden? Especially, like, the God Slayer, I can never remember his name, but especially him, that he had been through so much, and he had to live with those memories, and it was memories of both, like, things that he had witnessed and things that he had done and things that had been done to him. It was just, like, all of these layers of probably, like, traumatic experiences that he has to live with now, and it was a kind of, like, sacrifice that he made because he was the one who killed the gods. So now he has to remember, and his inner conflict I thought was very interesting, and I would have liked to know more about, because of, like, the experience that he had with the goddess of despair and how she forced him to love her but also let him keep his hatred of her. So he had this, like, horrible inner conflict. One of the things I thought was kind of interesting is that they kept saying that his hate for the goddess is what won out eventually, because his hate for her is what made him eventually, like, fight back and kill the gods. But I don't think that's necessarily true. I would argue that it was actually that his love for his wife, for the woman that he was married to for like 5 days, that it was his love for her that kind of pushed him to killing the gods. Because it was only once she was brought to the gods that he did anything. Because his own suffering, his own hatred wasn't really enough to like push him to action, but in order to protect her, like her being brought to the gods and being harmed was kind of the last straw, and that's what pushed him over the edge. And so I thought it was really interesting that the other characters interpreted his actions as his hatred of the goddess winning out over his love for her, whereas I would say it was his love for his wife that won out and overrode his love for the goddess, which was like artificial. Then another theme, of course, was about forgiveness and mercy. It's related back to Sarai's perspective of like understanding that everybody has suffered and they don't have to keep hating each other. They don't have to keep going like who has suffered more and who can we like wreak vengeance on. And that it doesn't have to be that like one side was completely right or one side was completely wrong. Both sides can be both right and wrong. Both sides can have been wronged and both sides can have suffered. So there's a lot more that I could say about this book, but those are some of the things that I liked the most, that I enjoyed the most, or thought were the most interesting. But then there were some things that I was not a fan of with this. One of them was just how central the romance became. I wasn't like mad at that there was a romance, but I think that it took over the story more than it should have. I think that this story could have been totally fine without any romance, or just like a little smattering of romance, but it didn't need to be as much as was in the book. Because I felt like this world was really interesting. The magic was really interesting. The like themes, the story, the like moral questions that they had to go through, all of these things were really interesting, and this story could have stood on its own, this world could have stood on its own without a romance, and it really didn't need a romance. And then the romance really became very central to the story, and like I liked the two of them together, and I wasn't mad about the romance. And the two of them, they had a very like sweet romance with each other. It was very cute. That scene where they're like in the dream world and they're making food, but like the food can be really pretty, but they don't know what it tastes like, and so it doesn't taste very good. Like, oh, that was so sad. Both of them don't know what good food tastes like. Anyways, I just feel like the romance became more central than it needed to be, and it just felt very unnecessary. I would have liked more of the page time to be focused more on this world, and I thought that a lot of the themes and moral questions were much more interesting, and I would have liked more like digging into those, or like more digging into the character of the Godslayer and finding out more about him, because I think that his experience was very interesting and I would have liked to know more about him. But the thing that I disliked the most was the ending, and there are kind of like layers to this. First of all, I was mad that Sarai dies. Like, it felt like we just spent all of this time developing her character, getting her into this like relationship with Laszlo, and then she just dies out of nowhere. And it felt like, then it made it feel like the whole purpose of that like whirlwind romance was just like a way to manipulate your emotions so that you would be attached to her to make it sadder. Also, because apparently her just like dying as a character wouldn't be sad enough, it had to be that she was in a relationship with Laszlo so that it would make it more sad. I don't know. I just was like, it just made it feel like a lot of the character work that had been done up to that point was kind of pointless, because it was just to set up her character to die, just to make it more sad. So it felt like manipulative, I guess. But also, I hated the way that she died because it was so random and pointless. Like, she just falls off a building. like, I don't know, there was something about the way that she died that I was like, really? Like she just fell off a building. It wasn't, and it was totally by accident. I just was really frustrated by the ending, by that death. But then the thing that made me like, that was like more exasperated, but the thing that made me really mad was now that Minya has control of Sarai's ghost and she is going to manipulate, she's going to control the ghost and try to manipulate Laszlo with the ghost. And I just hate that so much, because up to this point, one of the things that has, I don't know if it's necessarily most important to the story, one of the things that's been most important to me is that Sarai's character like would not give in to Minya, that she was the only one who would stand up to Minya, that she was able to, like, I don't know, just like be her own person and not be controlled. And I really loved that about her character, and I hated Minya so much. I don't know why, out of like all of the characters, like villains, there are very few that I hate as much as I hate Minya. And I think part of it is just because, like, for one thing, Minya is one of those people who, like, you cannot change her mind no matter what. Like, she's like a solid wall. It doesn't matter if it makes logical sense. It doesn't matter, like, nothing matters. She will only think what she thinks. But also just like how incredibly controlling Minya is, and how, like, they were saying that it like deeply angers her that she cannot control people the way she controls ghosts. And then also how super spiteful she is, that she wants other people to suffer. And like, even when, so like, she tries to manipulate Sarai by making the drug that she takes to help her sleep, she makes that stop working. And then when that doesn't work, she's really pissed. And then when Sarai figures out how to stop herself from having nightmares, like, Minya is so deeply angry about that. She's so angry that Sarai has figured out a way to stop herself from suffering, because Minya wanted her to suffer, because she wants to control her, because if she doesn't get her, because she can't stand not getting her way. And I just, oh my god, I cannot stand Minya. And so much of the story has just been this like battle of wills between Sarai and Minya, and then at the end, Minya gets control over Sarai. Like, oh, it was so annoying. I was so mad about that. And I was like, it was one of those endings that I guess it made me feel like, also like, what was the point of all of this? Like, one of the things that I loved so much about Sarai was that she would like go head to head, at least like in willpower, with Minya, and that she would not back down, and that was an important part of the story. And then at the end, it just felt like it was all for nothing because she gets controlled by Minya anyway. And also it just was like, it just felt like, oh, this is the worst of all possible situations, because for so long Sarai has been like battling with Minya, has been working so hard and working so hard to not be controlled by Minya. And now she's completely under Minya's control. And I just, oh, it made me so angry. I was so angry at the end. And I can't tell if this is legitimately, like, do I actually think this is a bad ending? And I'm mad at it because I think it is a poorly done ending, or it's a perfectly fine ending and I just hate what happened to these characters. Because there's a difference between my personal, like, being mad about what happened versus it being like a poorly written ending. And I cannot decide. I've been thinking about this book for like weeks now since I finished it, and I don't know. So I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments if people have opinions about whether you loved this or hated it, what you thought of the ending. I am going to be reading the next book. I already have Muse of Nightmares right here. I ordered it like almost immediately after finishing Strange the Dreamer because I feel like I want to read the next book, see what it's like, see how it kind of wraps everything up, and hopefully reading the second book will help me figure out how I feel about the first book. Also though, this is a tangent rant thing, but I ordered this from Book Depository and it's not the same edition as the Strange the Dreamer that I have. I measured my book and read the specs on the Book Depository website to make sure I was getting the same size, same edition of Muse of Nightmares as I have of Strange the Dreamer, even though I don't especially love this edition. And it's still not the same! What did they send me? Oh my god. I was just like so frustrated by this. That's a separate tangent though. But yes, so I'm going to be reading Muse of Nightmares very soon, either in July or August, because I need to know what happens. I need to figure out how I feel about Strange the Dreamer, and I feel like the only way I'm going to be able to figure that out is by reading what happens next. So that is all for my discussion of Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. As I said, there's a lot of other things I could talk about. I have a lot of thoughts about this book, but I need to end this eventually. Those are the main things. And as I said, I would love to hear all of your thoughts about these books, whether you loved them or hated them. As I said, I'm very like in the middle about it because there are things that I loved a lot and things that I really hated, but I want to talk about this book. So just let me know your thoughts. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye.